Hello, my name is Elias van den Busche. This is going to be my part two of my global warming speech. So, everybody has heard of global warming and everybody knows, okay, global warming is bad for the planet. But how bad is it exactly? The Earth has been warming up at an average rate of zero point 0.2 degrees Celsius every single decade. For reference, that's 0.36 degrees Fahrenheit. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but let's put that into context here. The next 50 years, using those figures, which will only continue to rise, the Earth will have warmed up by another 10 degrees Celsius on average. And the land areas of the Earth, the continents themselves, are warming up at about twice the rate that oceans are. So, where do most of the world population live? On land. This isn't good news, and there are a few causes for this problem. So, this is a very, very serious problem, and it has a few different causes. So, rising temperatures is number one, extreme weather is number two, and changing weather patterns is cause number three. All three of these contribute to the phenomenon that we all know as global warming, and the source of Ghana Journal of Geography from 2018, I really like what they said here, and it's very, very clear. Global warming causes, consequences, and global responses. Global responses is really the thing that's interesting here because it doesn't seem like we're seeing a lot of that recently, especially because some industries, like the oil industry, for example, any regulation to regulate global warming will go directly against the oil industry and be very bad for their business, which is part of the problem because they have so much influence. I pulled from a source here from Communications, Earth and Environment 2025. So they say Arctic warning can affect weather patterns, which kind of goes back to what I was saying in my thesis about changing weather patterns. The fact that the Arctic is warming up so significantly and we are losing so much sea ice has drastic effects on the world's climate. Reducing the temperature of the poles and adding a lot more water into our oceans can have very, very drastic effects for the climate, which is very, very finely tuned, and any little thing can set it off balance. And the problem is only getting worse. And the sea level will continue to rise. So I pulled that from a source called Sustainability from March 2017. Sea level rise can affect infrastructure. So what they mean here is animals, ecosystems, and people can all be affected by rising sea level due to melting sea ice, which is due to the rising global temperatures. And all of this has something to do with called the greenhouse effect. Everybody's heard of the greenhouse effect, and here's why it's so significant. As the Earth heats up and gets warmer and warmer, we run the risk of, in say 1,000 years from now, 1,000,000 years from now, which sounds like an unrealistic timescale, but just for the moment, let's imagine it. That would turn Earth into a planet like Venus, our neighbor. Venus actually has been theorized to be very, very similar to Earth in the past, but a runaway greenhouse effect, or the greenhouse effect that we see on Earth, only drastically worse, getting worse and worse, turned Venus into an inhospitable planet. And Earth is gradually, but steadily going on this track, unfortunately. Now, that sounds really extreme, so let's break it down. These problems mostly come from human activity and human energy use. Now, I mentioned the oil infrastructure earlier, and that's a big part of it. The oil machinery industry all over the world, including and under that umbrella would be transportation, cars, trains, planes, putting off a lot of gases into the atmosphere. And a lot of those gases either are bad for human health and they affect a lot of people and animals and entire ecosystems, or they contribute to the rising levels of CO2 and methane in the atmosphere. Fossil fuels, cars, factories, power plants, all of these are good examples of things that humans, since the industrial age, have come to rely on, but unfortunately are slowly putting off more and more gases into the atmosphere. And greenhouse gases, as I mentioned before, do trap heat. From the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, May 20th, 2007, I really like this quote. Greenhouse gases are tied to fuel and everyday energy use. That essentially summarizes entirely of what I said before, and I really like this source here, and I got a lot of information from them actually, because they go into detail about how carbon dioxide and methane, especially methane, are very, very bad for our planet, because methane especially is much worse when causing the greenhouse effect as compared to carbon dioxide. It raises the temperature of the planet on average much more rapidly than carbon dioxide does. And so, what can we do about it? So, right now, what scientists are mainly doing is just observing and studying using climate models. From the environmental research letters from June 2025, I like what they say here. Climate models help study global weather patterns. A lot of scientists are using them nowadays to try to predict what the next 10, 15, 20, 50 years will look like at the current rate that the greenhouse effect is worsening. But we can't predict everything, especially as problems such as deforestation, which leads to slower intake of CO2, continue to affect our planet. So, what are some solutions? So, let me run through these. Clean energy, and I got this from the Advertiser from December 6, 2005. Clean energy is one possible climate solution. They say possible because it's not a magic bullet. It's not going to automatically fix all of our problems, but it can be very useful if we use it in the right kind of environment. We can reduce emissions, we can try to pull some greenhouse gases out of the air. I like what Global Sustainability from 2025 here says. Climate goals involve emissions reduction and greenhouse gas removal. And this is where I got my information from. Those two solutions can be very, very consequential in a positive manner in combating this problem. And better public transportation. So, more efficient cars, EV cars, are fortunately starting to turn out more and more. That can really help a lot. Protecting our forests, preparing for heat, storms, fire, flooding, all sorts of natural disasters, which will continue to become more common, especially as we're seeing and here in California with El Nino getting so much worse because of changing climate patterns. So, I want to wrap this up with a few of the problems, causes, and solutions. Some of the problems are the rising heat in the atmosphere, the changing weather patterns, and as I mentioned before, global sea ice melting at the poles is having drastic effects. Global warming is very serious, and as the Ghana Journal of Geography from 2018 says, consequences, causes, and global response. So we need to focus on getting the Earth back warmer, focus on those causes, really, really look at the consequences, and focus on getting the Earth less warm.